Kol chazaka sheni motaina. A chazaka is not just being there for 3 years. You need a claim which explains how you got into the field in the first place. Kate said, how so? Amar lo mato sebetoch shali. If somebody came and says, what are you doing in my field? And he's been there for 3 years, right? So he says, I don't know. Shlom ali adam davar. Nobody ever told me not to be here. Saying a chazaka, that's not a chazaka. Well, you have to say it's like Atama Chartali, you sold it to me. Atana Satali Maton, you gave it to me as a gift. I raise a chazaka, that's considered to be a chazaka. Va'abah mishum Yerusha enetzar chazaka. Somebody claims he inherited the field. Somebody claims he inherited the field. That's tantamount to having said he acquired the field. You know, it just struck me right now on the spot. Nowhere in the Yerushalmi do we see the concept of chazaka of 3 years being because a person keeps his document for 3 years. In the Bavli it says...
You said that yesterday. No.
I said that yesterday?
Yes.
I deny that I said it yesterday. Yeah.
I think you raised the issue.
I raised some other issue yesterday. I forgot what it was. Something about the Yerushalmi not having something. But I don't think it was this issue. But name it, if I did, I'm raising it again. Which is that you don't remember me saying that, right? Okay, but I don't remember saying it. But the Yerushalmi never brings down. Lieberman says something else about this, but that's something else they don't bring down. I don't remember what it was. But Taka doesn't bring down the concept of documents, losing documents. So it's possible the Yerushalmi doesn't hold that whole svara. That 3 years a person watches his document and afterwards he loses it. Yerushalmi just says 3 years is a proof in and of itself. That's without the document issue, quite possibly. There's selected parts. We're losing it soon. The end of Bava Basra. That's it. V'tzarech chazaka says more. Besides the taina, you also need to have a chazaka. In other words, the last case says Yoresh doesn't, and the heir doesn't require a taina claim. That's his claim, yeah, but he needs to have 3 years. Tamti learned over there, Rabbi Shul concedes the point. If a person says to his friend, Saw the Zun, now there's a right, means possession. Right. That's your sustaining what I'm saying. Yeah. Okay. Now there's a whole swath of material missing here, which is a very long piece, which is in the Shari Eretz Yisrael, not even in the Escorial, but based on the parallel Sugi and Ksubas. It says Rabbi Shul concedes, if somebody says to his friend, I'll tell it to you over in English, because it's going to, reading the Hebrew just make it confusing. Rabbi Shul concedes a point in the following case. A guy says to his friend, you know what, this field that I was in, it was once your father's. But now, it's mine because I bought it from your father. So he's believed to say this, even though he doesn't have years of chazaka. Why a pesha or a pesha eater? We had no question that it was his field. He raised a question by saying it wants to belong to the other guy's father. So since he's the one who raised the question, he can also resolve the question by saying, but I bought it from him. Okay? If, however, there aid him that the other person's father was once the owner, and he says, I bought it from him, he's not believed if he hasn't been there for 3 years. If he has been there for 3 years, he obviously is believed, because that's the time as I bought it from your father. He's been there for 3 years. Right? No aspect of shiur. Now that's only if there's no shiur and karkos. That's only if his father didn't die. The father of the guy, the initial person, didn't die when he was holding on to the field. But if the guy's father died while he was holding on to the field, and this guy comes and says, well, I bought it from your father, we don't believe him. Even if he was there for 3 years. Because we say, what are you talking about? The day that his father died, that morning he went out to hold the field. You didn't buy it from him. When did you buy it from him? Now, it's conceivable that he bought it and the sale was effective after death. But we don't assume that to occur. He has to be proved that the field is definitely his. Okay? Kado. Now going back to we're over here. Kado, like this case, Reuven ochel sad b'cheskel shushalo. Reuven is feeding a field on the assumption that it's his. Baby Shimon Adam and Shimon brings witnesses. Shemeis Avim Misocha that on the day he died, his father, Shimon's father, was holding on to the field. So Reuven is a usurper, right? So Mafkilam and Reuven, we take it away from Reuven, the usurper of the Avim Shimon, and we give it to Shimon. Ella Holach Reuven baby Adam Shalom Meis Avim Misocha. But what about that if Reuven turned around and brought witnesses that the day he died, the father was not in the field? That matter, we have no proof that the field was the father's at the time of his death. So in that case, do we reverse the judgment? So Rav Nachman says, and he says something similar in the Bavli as well. But now I'm Rav Nachman Yaakov, Ana fiktim Reuven, I took it away from Reuven. Ana mechazron, I'll give it back to Reuven. In other words, I took it away from Reuven when the testimony was going against him, or when the case was going against him. Now the case is going for him. I'll give it back to Reuben. Okay, says the Gemara, Rav Amar, and the Shaitor Israel changes it based on the parallel Surya. Rabbana the Taman Amrin, the rabbis above us said no. Shenasata be based in Asata. When you gave it based on a psak in din. Mikan ve'elach, from there on in. Therefore, Hamotzu Chaver Elav Araya. If somebody wants to extricate from this person to whom Beis Din awarded it, he has to bring definite proof, not just demolish his adversary's proof, but bring his own proof. Okay, it's just not enough to demolish it. Once Beis Din is paskin, we don't overturn the psak unless counter evidence is brought. It's not enough to demolish your foe's evidence, you have to bring your own evidence. Okay? Now it's interesting that the Lieberman brings down the Ramban and Rashba, hold based on our bring a proof on our study in the Yerushalmi, that if the case where Rav Nachman said we give it back to the other litigant is a case where Reuven initially had it, Shimon took it away from him, Shimon's case was undermined, then we will give it back to Reuven. But what if it's the case that initially it didn't belong to anybody, and it was under litigation because there was a question it would belong to, and then they awarded it to Reuven. Now, if they take it away from Reuven for some reason, it's going to go back to the situation of being no man's land. It's going to be subject to Kol Dalin Gvar. Whoever beats the other guy gets it. So he said that they want to say that you see from our suit, you only give it back when there's definitely somebody to go back, give it back to, not where it's going to end up being the subject of a dispute. Lieberman questions that. He's not so sure you see it in the suit. It just happens to be that was the case. It's under discussion. Doesn't necessarily mean that when there are two guys still fighting, you won't give it back to them as a result of overturning your halacha. So it's not no clear-cut evidence here. But that's the interesting thing. It says the concept called al-mikvar. Two people striving over some piece of property. Each are trying to prove that it's his. That's a unique Bavli concept we don't find in Yerushalmi. Okay? So whether we do it or not, he claims we don't, and he certainly knows better than me. Says the Gemara, Mimodia. Now, the Mechamayim says this is a separate sugya here, a separate issue. The question is when so we were talking about when a guy says he inherited a field, so then he doesn't need to have any other kind of how it came to it, any other claim how it came to his possession. The fact that he says he inherited suffices. So it says the Gemara, how do we know that he inherited that? And they mean that the day of death, actually the previous owner, the father or a close male relative, or a close relative of this individual was alive, and it went over directly to him, right? So says the Gemara, Eidei Misa Modim. The Eidei Misa testified belonged to the father, at least for one day, by the way, it belonged to the father. Then he died, and then this guy came in. There's more. So what about how God's called? Let's imagine found case. There are no witnesses around who are aware. Says Smart that you have a problem. You're right. The field remains in that case under the chazaka of its owner. From there on in, whoever wants to prove differently has to prove differently. So therefore, if taka their Eidei Misa, then that helps the guy who wants to acquire it via chazaka. If there are no Eidim, so then we give it to the guy we give it to the other guy. In other words, if the heir doesn't have legitimate proof that it was his father or ancestors, and until the day he died, so then the heir does not get it, and remains wherever the Bailim are. I don't know exactly the Bailim are in this case, but in other words, in that case, you will not be able to extricate the field from the other individual. So therefore, you better have Eidim. If you're an heir and you're claiming inheritance, you better have Eidim that it was your father's on the day he died, and that he died while he was still in possession of the field. Otherwise, you're up the creek. Okay? Says the halacha for the halacha, Hashutfim, partners, Harishim sharecroppers, Hapotropsim, guardians or trustees, Elam chazak chazaka on the fields under their control. A woman has no chazaka in his wife's property. He's just a steward of that property. Below nor a woman in her husband's property. Below nor a father in his son's property. Below ben nor a son in his father's property. By medvar, when is the truva machzik? Where when somebody's holding on to something for 3 years. However, b'noisein matona. If we're talking about somebody who's giving a gift of any sort, in that case, chazaka is established with much less than we've been discussing till now in the parak. Achim shecholku, or brothers who divide up. Or somebody takes hold of a hefker property, such as probably which hitherto belonged to a ger, then no gada parts goshu. What he has to do in order to make a kinyan chazaka is to build up a little fence, lock the yard, or build up a fence, or damage a fence, which is assertion of ownership. Then haray the chazaka, then it becomes chazaka and comes under his jurisdiction. Okay. Says more further, shutaf. It says on Mishnah, shutaf. Partners can establish chazaka. Shmuel Amar Leis Kan Shutaf. Shmuel says, don't include shutaf in our Mishnah. Rather, shutaf, the Scoria puts in the word yesh instead of the word ein. Big change. Shutaf yesh chazaka. A partner can establish chazaka in his partner's property. Lochin Amar Shmuel, did Shmuel not say shutaf shiur v'nota? A shutaf who went down and planted kenoter b'shus, it's if he planted with his partner's permission. So therefore, how can you establish chazaka? It should be like a sharecropper. His presence in the field is expected. It's not establishing a true presence. So says Gemara, hey the Tamar, I skipped some which Scorio adds. Let me just go back a minute. Arma Shmuel said, Shutaf shiur v'nota, this is in the 5th line down from the top of the page. Shutaf, a partner, shiur v'nota, who went down and planted, kinokter b'shus, has no the jurisdiction, and I didn't skip anything, did I? No, I thought I skipped something. Says Gemara, sorry. Let me start with you. I got mixed up there. Shutaf, a partner, Shmuel Amar Leis Kan Shutaf, Shutaf not be the Mishnah partners can't establish chazaka against their partners. Shutaf, continuing that vein, Shutaf yesh lo chazaka, that's the way the Scorio manuscript writes it. Lochin Amar Shmuel, did not Shmuel say Shutaf shiur v'nota? A partner goes down and plants in a field. So if he's planted with the authorization of his other partner, so how can you have established chazaka? Chazaka is only when you're going against the grain of the established ownership. But shutful says enhancing or going with the grain of the established ownership. So therefore, how can a shutful acquire chazaka, right? Yeah, we had that.
So it would make sense that you could leave a
a Brera issue, you're saying.
Very honest. But you can have chazaka if you're not a partner with somebody, because the chazaka you have is against your partner. So it makes sense if you're not a partner in every segment versus, so you're just like, you're right, it is a prayer aspect. You determine later on exactly what is it that your partnership was, and therefore you could have chazaka in such a thing.
Well,
The notion of chazaka doesn't seem to apply.
it's not bad what you're saying, but the Gemara actually says better. Sorry about that. But it's not a bad story you're saying. That it's possible through prayer to establish chazaka or something to that effect. But here the Gemara says actually, Logan and my Shmuel did not Shmuel say Shuter Shera V'Nota K'Noter B'Shus. It's as if you got permission. So it says more. Now, Hein the Tamar Shutav, that which we call a Shutav. And so that which says Shutav, it should be Yeshlu Chazaka. That's a Skoril Hat. Instead of Shiur V'Nota K'Noter B'Shus, it should be that which you say Shutav, Yeshlu Chazaka, Can establish Chazaka, is but also She'omed Sham. It's when his partner is standing there and sees him conducting himself as if he's the owner for 3 years, so that establishes a chazaka. If his partner does not protest as acting as an owner, opposed to a co-owner, so then that establishes his chazaka. However, behind the Tamar Kishut of Ein that which partner is not of chazaka on the joint property, is B'Sheina Mitzvah, the other partner is not there, so he doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't know that owner number one is treating this as his own private domain. So therefore, in that case, there is no chazaka, okay? Because he doesn't know that he has to make a protestation because he doesn't realize there's something underhanded and devious going on here. Says more further, hostile possession is what it's called? Okay, same idea. I think it's the same idea. Yeah. Mao Maisit Chusei, can he bring Mao Maisit Chusei? I actually skipped those words I prepared. What does that mean? So what means, what does Shmuel learn in our Mishnah instead of the word shutav? It's one of the things there's don't have a chazaka which would replace the concept of a partner not having a chazaka. If you hold a partner, it does establish chazaka. It says, he uses omnim, craftsmen, gozim, and thieves, and no chazaka, because obviously their possession is suspect. Ra'avdon, we have a case of this. Ra'avdon, should be Eitzel, no, maybe El is good enough. But anyway, let's use Eitzel. He saw a slave he saw a slave, what?
What is the word after?
Oh, Uman. He saw a slave by a craftsman. Bekalov and his vessels, Eitzal Koivis, by the launderer. So he says to the craftsman, the launderer, Teliavti, give me my slave. Telikaloi, give me my vessels. So the guy says, the craftsman or the tailor or the cleaner, Amarlo, Atona Satlu Maton, you gave it to me as a gift, Atomakartuli, you sold to me. Ein a chazaka. It's not considered to be a valid chazaka, because in these cases, actually, we say that the craftsman most likely did in fact get this for safekeeping, not as a gift, because people don't give gifts to craftsmen; they give them stuff to mend. Let's say the seamstresses or whatever we're dealing with, right? Says the Gemara, second. What? No, I'm not up there yet. No. Almost, it said again, a Torah Satali, 3 lines above that. You gave me a gift, my Torah. The Torah Chatali, you sold to me. However, a Torah Marta, it should actually be low, Mochroli. If you approach a person who bought from that middleman, so then you claim, you said, sell it to me. A Torah Marta, you said, to give it to me, Maton is a gift. Harezu chazaka. This is about Katsol chazaka. The answer is actually a fascinating case. In other words, if you have a guy who claims that he actually owns the thing, under many circumstances you don't believe him, including craftsmen. But if you go to a guy who bought from the craftsman, he says, well, obviously if I bought from the craftsman, then you gave permission to sell. So that's an argument which we do seems take into account. Okay, and because in that case, it's not, the craftsman is not defending himself. He's defending a third party. And that's possible. You don't usually give a craftsman stuff to keep himself. You give it on consignment, then he might sell to somebody else. So there the third party is believed. Okay? Harisim, sharecroppers. Ravuna Mar Baris Olam, which sharecropper can establish chazaka? A sharecropper who is forever, meaning he's constantly employed. However, Abu Baris L'Shah, but a temporary Yesh L'Chazaka, as Chazaka finishes Arisus, is sharecropping and establish chazaka by being in the 3 years beyond. Rabbi Yochanan Shlagish Tarvein Amin, Rabbi Yochanan Ben Shlagish both said, I feel very sure Ein Lo Chazaka, even a temporary oris does not have a chazaka. He doesn't establish his supremacy here. Why is that? Because the name of Nachas Ruche Minei, because maybe because maybe even if it's a temporary oris, he found favor in his master's eye, so his master kept him on afterwards. So that's what you say. There's also chazaka by a temporary oris, because it's possible that his master kept him on even after his period was expired. In fact, his working after his period expired does not mean he bought the field, but rather it means that the master kept him on because he was such a productive fellow. Yeah, but here it means left him in his. It really means to leave, not to push. So he left him in this spot. That's what it's saying. So the time we learned over there, Oris and no chazaka, and Oris has no chazaka because we always assume he took the field as sharecropping. However, Ben Oris, if his son comes and sharecrops the field, there's chazaka, and there is chazaka. Says the Gemara, and therefore after 3 years he can claim he actually bought it, because it's not that affiliated with the father. Rabbi Yochanan, Reish Lakish Armin, they both said, Ap Oris, even Oris, Ben Oris, the son of Oris, En La Chazaka. He doesn't have a Chazaka. In other words, he can't establish Cheskas Kimushanim. The name of Nachas Ruach Me'avoy. Maybe the reason why he said whatever he said is because that yeah, right. The guy liked the guy. Thank you. The guy he liked the guy's father, so he kept his son. So there was no chazaka because perhaps he was kept on in employment. Says the Gemara, it should be Coin Lieberman Umar. Rabbi Yochanan would say, I'm not sure it is. Rabbi Yochanan said, Oris, Shori, Oris. Yeah, it is Rabbi Yochanan. And Oris, who took a sharecropper, who took a sharecropper. In other words, it's like a second contractor on top of the first contractor. So, Ein lo chazaka. That, there is no chazaka to be established here. Shederech Oris Loria Adam, Oris. In other words, it's very common that the person brought down there to supervise construction. However, Adam if you have a man who is controlling his wife's blind trust, right, which he entered into a marriage, he has chazaka if he's been in it long enough. Because and the reason why this occurs is because men take care of their wives' affairs. Okay, so the therefore there's a chazak against his wife. Now Lieberman explains it's talking about specifically the fields which were not part of the dowry, right? So, what? Right. So even though he's in charge, he's being fakech, he checks it out from time to time. He's not going to be an owner despite that quasi trusteeship. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay. A husband does not have sovereignty over his wife's property, but it's only during his wife's lifetime. After she dies, he does have a chazaka, because at that time already it's assumed that they should have protested if it's not really his. Okay? A wife does not have property in her, does not have, cannot establish chazaka of 3 years in her husband's property. That's only his lifetime. But after his death, yeshul chazaka, then there is actually for a chazaka. In other words, the son, during the father's lifetime, is eating off the largesse of the father. But after the father dies, so then we assume that he acquired the field either by Yerusha or some other means, and therefore he does have chazaka. A father does not have rights to his son's property. That's only during his lifetime. But after the son dies, if he leaves over an estate, yeshlo chazaka, he can get involved. Now, we're going back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah said that if you make a fence around the field, that's a kinyan. Rav or take it down. Rav said it's only pechas mesora. It's you take it down from below 10 tefachim, or mosif al asora, or you add onto asora tefachim. In other words, not within asora tefachim of the ground. Yeah. Or Mosif Asor Lehman wants to say it was lower 10 tefachim and you added up till 10 tefachim. In other words, it has to be a significant act in terms of the preservation of the field, which is either to add up to 10 tefachim or subtract from 10 tefachim, either adding or eroding onto the field. Shmuel said not true. Afilu parats b'makom she'roa ain't real floats. Even you made a hole in a place where it's not normally suited to be a hole in the fence. The guardian made a fence, a makom she'ain royal l'gdor to a place which is not suitable normally to be fenced. Harei zu chazaka considered to be about chazaka. Says the Gemara, Vatani, and this is a proof that there is no kinyan actually on the field until you acquire do chazaka therein. In other words, you need chazaka. Vatani, we learned. So he sells something to his friend, and the buyer was lazy, and he didn't actually take hold of it, even though he's a bona fide buyer. And the moicher went down after the guy paid the money and took hold of the field again. On his grabbing hold cancels the sale and cancels the gift. So it's actually still there's still no kinyan until it's beyond the point of no return.
So there's no transfer of money.
What?
There's no transfer of money.
I'm not sure. It's certainly not germane to the issue.
Transfer of money to make another kinyan of money.
What?
Take the money into your possession. Local takes the money into possession. And that way, how does it work on the shiur? You take the money,
You take money, pay, and do mashicha.
so it has to be the mashiach of the buyer.
Yeah. Or the king of chazaka, the buyer, whatever it is. So in this case, it's a very big chiddush what Yerushalmi is saying, of course. But if a buyer has bought the field, it's actually paid for it, which should be a kinyan d'oraisa. But he hasn't yet taken, he hasn't yet taken over, which indicates that he still wants to use the kinyan chazaka. So in that case, we actually put off the 404. We put up the finality of the sale, and the seller can go back and overturn the sale which went on. It's a monumental chiddush. In other words, you can actually overturn what went on till now, even though the payment took place. Because Moses usually kindness by what I mean says like this: money usually makes the acquisition by land, and here we're preventing the money from making the acquisition. Obviously, only because they themselves probably stipulated that the final kinyan for this land should be when he takes possession. So he didn't take possession and was forestalled in some way, shape, or form, so then the original owner can hop around and get in. That's what we're saying. Okay? So it's a chiddush, because usually money acquires. Here there must be some delay mechanism which makes money not make the acquisition.
Yes. Go back to my other question before was, what act does the chaos make land to assume possession of it?
Go there, no parrots.
Say he doesn't do that. He has to do some action like that.
Yeah, or one of the things we're about to see in one of the subsequent Mishnayos. But otherwise, it doesn't acquire it. That's right. Okay, Allah above. Shnayim Edom also, two witnesses come and testify that this guy was there for 3 years. Benim to Zayimim, and they found to be Zayimim. Mishalim also called, they have to pay everything, every single, everything they intended to make him lose. If there are 2 witnesses for the first year, 2 witnesses for the second year, and 2 witnesses for the third year. We distribute the liability for having testified falsely among all 3 groups. You have 3 brothers, and one stranger joins each one of the brothers in succession. So Arei Elu Sholosh Eduyos. It's considered to be 3 separate testimonies, right? Each witness is separate, and therefore distinct about each year testifying. But since the second witness was present at all 3 events, right? So therefore, Hain Edus Achos is going to have ramifications. The fact that it's all one continued testimony on the event. We'll see in a few minutes. Amrullah said, socially. If you met someone in your field and he says, you say to him, "What are you doing in my field, in my yard?" So and he answers, "I've been here for 3 years." Says Umar, This guy went and brought the witnesses that he has the years of chazaka intact. And this guy this guy came and found his age to be Einazomim. Harayz and no sin laws asada. In this case, in this judgment, the field goes back to the original and justified owner. But who eats the fruit of the last 3 years? Not the original owner. The original. So here the Rishonim say that who eats the fruit of those 3 years? The initial orchard growers. Zero said, Adam teaches us, our Mishnah teaches us, Eid Zayim Ein Yisrael Basin. Eid Zayim, it doesn't take a basin to certify him criminally insane. He can certify himself criminally insane. But what he means is that, where do we see that over here? We see that if he said all 3 statements about their various different 3 years in one fell swoop, and he's found to be apostle on one of them, or that he's found to be apostle on all of them, right? So if you're going to say there are distinctions, then it would be not distinctions, not the word I want. If there be decrees by basin who was apostle, then what it would be is you wouldn't apostle all the various different testimonies they testified. In that statement, they would have just apostled one of the statements that they testified. It doesn't make any sense, does it?
There is so one of the years, just one, right? Just one of the options.
Right, and you have to pay nevertheless for all 3 years, because all 3 years are one option. If they're the Edom on all 3 years, or some configuration of that. So Eid Zayim Basin. If he is Nifsal Basin, I guess what we do is we say, or we do say this, that the testimony only Eid Zayim is possible based in. So it's only the testimony concerning which he's being interrogated right now that becomes puzzle. Only that immediate testimony. I'm still not sure what I'm saying. 1 second. Yeah, okay, what he means to say is like this. Since Eitzomim is not done to be based on only it's done independently. Yeah. Right, so it's not afraid, but if your Eitzomim been based on it somewhere, I remember. The old Eitzomim is possible hapiatzo, so anything he said is possible. It's only based. It's only when Basin certifies him. So everything he said previously was kosher. So he wouldn't have to give back 2 years, right? Only have to give back with 3 years. Only give back 1 year. He would be possible on that 1 year, but not on the other 2 years. We say once he set up psul on 1 year, he's possible on all 3 years, and therefore the whole testimony is canceled, and he has to make restitution for all 3 years.
We don't care the fact that all the years are linked together.
Right? No, that doesn't matter to us. We still, each crop, we look at it independently. All right, that's one of the Chiddush of Bava Basra. Okay. These are things which have chazaka. Those are things which don't have chazaka. Now, these are cases where you establish chazaka. Now, it's not clear. The Rishonim argue about this. If this mission say about the acquisition via chazaka, say about the chazaka of 3 years, which proves ownership. These are things which have chazaka. If you put an animal, into the yard, you put up ovens and stoves, and grindstones, and you released roosters, and those and you put the fertilizer in your courtyard. Ain't a chazaka, it's not a chazaka, because you're not doing anything out of the ordinary. But if you did to the animal, made for the animal, you made a pen around the house that you're acquiring. And so too you made something permanent to place the oven. And so too for the small oven. And so to the grindstones. Or even if you put roosters into your house, which means you're trying to watch them particularly well, which requires the house. Also, makom lazivlo, or if you made a place for fertilizer, and it's not just on the surface, but amak shlosha o gava, shlosha 3 tvachim deep, or 3 tvachim above ground, and raise the chazaka. All these are considered to be forms in which chazaka applies. Says Marmar says, no go shoot for yos mevakim zelos every time you go lim. Partners used to let the other partners let the roosters come home to roost in the yard. So they were moichel that. So what do you mean here that the roosters are a problem? Rabbi Yosef said, "Must Islam okay?" Rabbi shouldn't say that. That's not a problem. Rabbi says, "Elishneyan asur." This Bryce, whatever it is. Elishneyan asurim lamid rechaim v'taner ulegal tarnagolim. They're both not allowed to put in a millstone and a oven and to raise chicks. Says Marmar Elazar says, "Tarnagolim b'chotzer she'ena shelo harezu chazaka." If you have birds who go into chotzer not his, then he can establish chazaka. What's the taina though there? I guess the taina is that he got it from hefker because the birds came on their own. So if he has a taina that was hefker and he has the 3 years, then it is a chazaka. Okay?
The chazaka is on what? Use of the land.
What? Yeah, use of land for roosters. It's cheskas tashmishim. That's right. Unless it was kinyan chazaka. That these are what necessary in order to acquire land or a house by a chazaka. You know, it's a different type of chazaka. Lechazeku kni, go take hold of it and acquire. So it's not quite. It's a question what our mission is talking about here. So, Amrai said vios makes sense what he says. Manavshach, no matter what, if he has permission to grow there, Harezagito, he must have grown there because it says his. If he doesn't have permission to grow stuff there, well, he's been there for 3 years. I raised chazaka, so he established chazaka nevertheless. Okay, so no matter what, he can establish chazaka in that manner by having the roosters there. Says more, Hamarzev ein lo chazaka. Marzev is a small drain spout, doesn't have a chazaka. Yeshim koma chazaka. If its place has a chazaka, the Mar's going to explain what that means. Mazchela is a large downspout. Yesh chazaka, it has a chazaka. Then we're going to explain that. Shlomitzi, the Egyptian ladder, ein lo chazaka. The Egyptian ladder is a small ladder, and therefore it doesn't establish chazaka to be present because the owner can move it at random and does. However, if you had a sulam utsuri, a Tyrolean ladder, the yesh chazaka, it's got a chazaka. Why? Because obviously it's massive and huge. What? No, it's not a step stool. We'll see in a while. Says Chalon Hamitris, an Egyptian window and la chazaka. Doesn't establish chazaka because it's very small. People not so marked on it. However, the Tzuris, a Tyrolean one, yesh la chazaka. Actually, does have a chazaka because people notice it and upset if their friend has it. Ezu Chalon Hamitris, what's an Egyptian window? It's so small. That your head cannot go through it. If it's got a rectangle, meaning a frame, so then it's already semi-permanent. Even the person's head cannot enter it. It's going to be a chazaka after 3 years. Okay, says Gemara, when the Gemara says by a drain pipe, it doesn't have a chazaka. But it does have a certain kind of chazaka, as to replace the chazaka. What does that mean? So Reish Lakish Amar Laharich Larchiv, it means that you have permission to make it larger or smaller, you, not the owner of the drain pipe, but rather the owner of the yard below, can make the drain pipe longer or shorter based on its irrigation needs and so on and so forth. Okay? Rabbi Yochanan Amar, L'chol osa ruach. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, he can't do all that. What he can do is he can move it along the side on which it was, but he can't touch. The owner of the yard cannot touch the thing itself. He could just move it along. I mean, I don't know if I'm explaining that properly, but he can move it anywhere on the side of the house where it is. Move the drain pipe over here, over there, wherever he wants. But he can't actually. You can't take it off, right? And Rish Lakish goes a step further. He says that he can make it longer or shorter. Okay? Says the Gemara about the owner of the property. Pnei Moshe says the drain pipe, but we're learning the owner of the property. Okay? Did you look at Pnei Moshe? Let's hear about that in Persian. But he does learn that. Says more about the end, then we learn Hamas Chela Yesh Lo Rishus Arba Amos. Now, nobody understands exactly what this means here, but I think it means like this: Hamas Chela Yesh Lo Rishus Arba Amos, Hamas Chela, which is a large drain pipe, and large drain pipes have much bigger chazakos. You can't move them at all. So Yesh Lo Rishus Arba Amos, its chazak is an authorization over 4 amos. So Islach Meimar Koloso Ruach. So it's possible that 4 amos means it takes up the entire side, and you can't move it on that side at all. So it must be that there its authorization is vis-a-vis its movement. With the kabasa, so too a marzev ein l'chazaka. It means that it can move throughout that entire side. Okay? So, the bottom line is that just like the maschela is stationary, and that's called its chazaka, meaning it could have a whole side of the house, because our amos might well be the side of a house. So too the marzev, the smaller drain pipe, when it says it doesn't have chazaka, it means it can be moved throughout the entire side. But it's not stationary on the side, but it can be moved on the entire side. So Rabbi Yochanan says, as long as you leave that side, you can redirect the flow of the water. The Tana came, we learned also, in Mokum marzev, the place where there's a marzev, a chotzer, there's this downspout, the small one in the chotzer. Yesh lo chazaka mokum kilucho. He can establish the right to have a place to drip down. The chotzer in the chazaka, but the specific place is not up to him; it's up to the Bava Basra. In other words, he has the right for stuff to come in, but not determine where it goes. The house Rabban, they said, Ad Shlosha Avokim. If until 3 rungs should be kikasa, it's like a cup, not above 3 rungs. It's a chair. Kisei. I have it on the side here. Even says it's a chair. Up to 3 rungs, it's a chair, a step chair, not a ladder. Above 3 rungs, it becomes a ladder. Okay? So, Ad Shlosha Avokim is considered to be a kisei. Amrei Lo Shei Rabbi Yanai, Rabbi Lasan Rabbi Yanai, in terms of what? Lenient Tumas Hamarta. Tuma attacks chairs differently than it attacks ladders. When it loses its status of Tomei, whether it becomes Tomei when it sits on it, or what's your different things. So therefore, in terms of Tumah, it's between 3 or 4 steps. He said, it's in terms of, actually it should be in terms of chazokos, I think it says here on the bottom in the Moshe, that in terms of when you can establish chazokah to have your ladder standing there. So it's only considered to establish a chazokah that you have the right to leave your ladder standing there if it's considered to be a ladder. If it's considered to be a chair, then it doesn't give you any rights, because chairs have no rights. It's only ladders which have rights. So it has to have more than 3 rungs in order to be considered a ladder. Says the Gemara, and yet another interpretation, has to do with walls and Shabbos. If a ladder is meant to remain there because it's so heavy, then it becomes part and parcel of the wall system, which is bad for you, because that means, well, it's not bad. It means, you can go over the wall, and when somebody doesn't go over the wall, it's bad, because then you can't make an air properly. It can be a chumrah and a kula. But so there's acts between 2 yards in this manner, so then, in terms of Shabbos, it's an issue how you can make an Erev or not. But if there's no, in other words, if the 2 yards are considered connected or not, has to do with the ladder in the middle. But certainly if the ladder is small, so small it's called a chair, it doesn't connect the 2 yards. Sometimes it's a chumrah, because you can't make an Erev from one to the other. Sometimes it's a kula, because each one can make an Erev by itself. So it's not really a chumrah or a kula, it's just a difference in halacha. Okay. Amr Yerushalmi said, Lo amru ela b'chotzer. Everything we said, we only said by a chotzer. Now, what are we talking about over here? This is talking about the windows. And when we said the windows, are the halos, the windows in our halal mishnah, it's only talking about in a courtyard. Ava begagos, by rooftops, even if the rooftop, even if the window is above 4 amos, which means it's taller, higher than most people, the other guy can impede upon you from putting out the window. Why can it impede upon you from putting out the window? Well, see, it doesn't really explain here, but the Achronim explain that it's much easier to see out of the roof and than to see from elsewhere. So therefore you have to be more meticulous with the roof. So now there's a whole thing missing here. Rabbi Yitzchak said this halachah from Rabbi Chanina. And when Rabbi Chanina said for Rabbi Pinchas bar Chama, he only said it in his own name. Or name of Rabbi Chanina, didn't say the name of and somehow, whatever happened, in the part of the square which is missing, turns out that Rabbi Yosha, who was the originator of the statement, his name wasn't mentioned when it was said over, right? So he got upset. Shem Rabbi Yosha, his name wasn't said over Rabbi Vishnu, he got upset about it. He said, no, Amarish Shmaitza, I said over the sugya. But Lo Rabbi Shmei, they didn't say it in my name. What kind of a chutzpah is that? Anyway, be that as it may, Lo Amru El B'chotzer. This is only true, as you just said, that whatever you say the name of Rabbi Yosha's name, it's only by chotzer, begagos, by rooftops, afilu ma'al me'arbaos makve, even when it's above 4 amos, they still, you have to have neighbors' consent in order to make them, and you might not be able to establish chazaka in them. Okay, Ziz. If you have something jutting out of your wall, and it's up to a tefach, it has a chazaka, meaning the next owner has to allow that to remain. And he can protest against any removal of that thing abutting out. If it's less than a tefach, he has no chazaka to establish definite ownership of it, and if somebody cuts it off, any ochlim chos, he cannot protest because it's not really his. Says Marilah B'Shariana said, Ziz, you'd say a tefach. If you have a ziz which is coming out of the sides of the house, and it's even only a tefach long, so then motziat afilu kama. You can extend it out as much as you want. Once it's there, tefach, you can extend it out as much as you want. So limshoch kama, you can extend it out as much as you want. When it's clear across the yard, it says more. Yeah, Rav Yosha said v'cholik is beso. If initially this ziz was not put up like a peg or a hook, but it's put up to be like a demarcation line between two houses or between two yards or something like that. So then it's not limited to the size of a tefach. It will be extended further out because anyway it's representative. It's not actually meant to be that size. It's meant to be representative of the border. So the extension of outwards is merely extension of the border, and that's okay. The border between two parts of a house. So therefore, that ziz, that peg can be extended. Okay? Is to hang things on it, right? No, but here you want it, there was like extending out tefa, you couldn't hang so much stuff on it. You want to extend it even more. So you can do if it was made to be a demarcation line. So that basically now to diminish tashmishin, but here now diminishing tashmishin usages, because anyway it was part of the border between the two. Okay? This is a very important halacha. See if you can wake up for this one. A person cannot open his windows into a common courtyard. Why is that? Because it's going to lead to peeping toms, right? Okay. If you bought a house into somebody else's yard, okay. Now, houses are budded yards, right? So now you bought a house which can go into somebody else's yard. You can open a window into somebody else's yard. You can't open it without their permission into somebody else's courtyard. So if you built a second floor in your house, you can't open up that second floor window into the common courtyard. If you want to build a window in your second floor, build, I think what it means is like this: build the house so that it's facing the door, the room on the second floor. It's facing the inside of the house. In other words, first you build a foundation. You build a room underneath, and then you build your second floor on top. So basically, you open it into your own house, but you can't open additional openings and windows from the second floor into the common courtyard. Okay? Also, you can't open into a common courtyard. Opening opposite opening, right? There was Bilam's praise to Am Yisrael, you saw the doors did not correspond to each other. There were windows opposite windows. If you had a small window or a small door, you can't make it bigger. If you had one door, one window, you can't make it two with doors and window. What you can do is open towards Rosh Hashanah. In other words, if there's a big major thoroughfare between you and the other guy, say you can have a door opposite a door and a window opposite a window. A cotton, or if it's a small one, most of so good you can make it large. Echad, if it was one, Osishkaim, you can make it two. Now, Hachatmar, here you say Pesach Keneged Pesach Mutter. Here you say there's a Tosefta where it says the Chachamim allow you to make a door opposite to the door. But in our Mishnah, Hachatmar Pesach Keneged Pesach Osir, it says it's forbidden. Hein the Tamar Mutter, it says it's permitted is B'mavui. Our mission didn't discuss a mavui. Our mission discussed the courtyard versus a major thoroughfare. But the Brisa says, according to the Yerushalmi here, that by a mavui also you can open door opposite door. The Tamer also, which it says forbids because you're shooting in a common courtyard. Says the Gemara, Vartani. I don't understand. Wait till the final price. It says, just like members of Korea can prevent additional other men's Korea from opening new doors into the courtyard. New doors, right? So to members of Movi can prevent members from opening new doors into the Movi. So how can you say the standards are different? You see, the standards are the same. You need permission by both the Chutz and Movi. How are the standards different? So Amar Rabbi Law said, no, after there was already permission to open the doors, then there's a change, then there's a difference. Because once it's permission by a Movi, you can open the doors opposite each other, by a Chutz or not. Why? Because the Movi is a thoroughfare, there are already people passing there. So once there's permission to open, because everybody agreed, then the doors can be opposite each other. Because anyway, you have to watch your doors and your privacy through your windows because of all the peeping toms passing through the thoroughfare. But before the initial permission was given to expand doorways into the Movi and into Chatzar, then they're equal. Then you need, excuse me, in both scenarios, no permission, you need permission before doing so. Okay? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan. Now, the next Gemara, till now I was explaining like the Meich HaMayim. The next Gemara, my opinion, nobody understood until I came along. Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said, Shanihi beginos, but I think it should say begagos. Shninu l'chafira. Now nobody knows what that's talking about. Roofs are different. What are we talking about? Roofs are different. Most people have the gears of ginos. Like the gardens are different. Where's it coming off of? And nobody has a valve shot. I think the shot is like this. The shot is that if on street level I can open a doorway opposite your doorway, I can't do that on a rooftop level. In the same street where I could open my door opposite your door, I can't open a window in my roof opposite a window in your roof. Why is that? Because on street level, anyway has to be careful of the passers-by, right? But on the second floor, I think I'm hidden. Gagos nitnu l'chafira means, chafira is like digging in, right? I think I'm hidden in the second floor. So therefore, there, you can't, even the same thoroughfare, on Carpenter Road, where you could open a door opposite another door, a window opposite another window, not on the second floor, only on the street level. Not bad, no?
Well, you're giving a interpretation to the
Right. I'm pretty sure, though, that that's one of its meanings. The chafira means hidden, yeah. The chafira is like the hidden. If I had a tip of my tongue, actually, concealment, yeah. But, I don't know if it's comfort out here. I was thinking that what? I don't see it from the time so probably just from the time. But I was thinking that there is some reference somewhere to chafira being a form of hiding. But I could be right. Could be I'm making it up. I mean, I certainly am making it up. Let me rephrase that. I certainly am making it up. But,
doesn't mean it's not.
yeah, he doesn't have here. There's a secondary meaning of chafar. One of the secondary meanings is to be embarrassed. Right? To be so it could be embarrassment also. Originally, like it says.
Yes, that's what you're saying.
Right, there's a pasuk. Bosha imchem od chafer you ladetchem. Your mother was very embarrassed for you, and chafer lavana bosha chama. So it could be also, instead of concealment, the same idea. Rather, it's given to do private activities. Okay. Now the next line else everybody has difficulty with. Amar Rabbi Nasser said, "V'charvus lo nidnu levanos." Ruins are not made to be rebuilt. So who cares? So I think the pshat is like this. In other words, if I have a ruin, and you have a house opposite my ruin, so the guy who opposite that ruin can open as many windows and doors as he wants. The guy who owns the ruin says not fair, because eventually I'm going to build up my ruin. And then, I'm going to have to deal with all of your openings, right? So he says, when you build it, we'll talk about it. In the meantime, well, as long as it's not built, churvus lo nidnu libanos. Okay? Says Rabbi Yaakov said, Tani Tamar learned over there. Haposech chalon, somebody opens a window. Now here it says b'koisel chatzero, which is true. But it should. There's a Gerson Shaitar which is slightly better. B'chotzer chavero, it's opposite his friend's yard. B'mam chaver, his friend is standing there. Which I open a new window opposite your yard, and you're standing there. So the word arba'am is a mistake. The Skorel doesn't have it. Posech v'smo. So I open with the left hand. No, I mean the other guy closes it with his right hand. In other words, it's figuratively speaking. In other words, I open it, he immediately closes it. Says why? Imagine this. We would just say he was standing there, so he gave permission, right? By standing there, it's tacit approval, is it not? It's more baloney tacit approval. I could say, Havina place loy, I want to see you sweat. Loy means toil. But you see, I wasn't agreeable. I just was enjoying you, seeing you suffer and working at something futile, which I'm going to counteract. What about what if he was standing, the friend was giving him rocks with which to build? But he was giving him the building materials, he was building the window, looking into the other guy's courtyard, the other guy's house. I could say, it should be Ba'u Gavra. Say, I was making fun of you. It was also part of my plan of making you feel like you're doing something worthwhile, and it was really a bunch of baloney. So therefore, you can immediately make a protestation. He didn't, even though he was standing there, he can protest and say, I didn't really agree to what was going on. There's a law by Tumantara. If you have five windows, one after another, and the shiur kulan kumlamak there, the minimum shiur to be considered a window in terms of tuma going through the window. In terms of Tumantara going through the window is the size of a drill hole. Now, why are we bringing this down here? Everybody's difficult. Why are we bringing this down here? So the Lehman says a nice explanation. It says the reason why we're bringing it down here is in order to tell us that there's the minimum size of a window is the size of a drill hole. But that window is not like the window in our Mishnah. The window in our Mishnah has a chazaka, right? If it's there and you were allowed to put it on, it's actually going back to a couple of shnites by Chalon HaMitzri, Chalon Zuri. If it's a large window and the guy didn't make a protest, you have a chazaka in it. But if it's a small window like this, you have no chazaka in it. Okay? The Dharma Seilam, the Marim Barnoi, that's the sister which the builders say, Chalon Shipsucha Li Steve, a window which is open into a street, a market, literally. Lo Nasi Salahafis, or it's not made in order to bring in beautiful scenery. It's only made for light, right? Became a chain of chazaka, and therefore, since it's only made for light, so therefore somebody can build opposite it. There's no chazaka on this window that this window should retain a scenery. There's no scenery for it to have. So therefore you can build opposite it. And the same is true with these small windows the size of drill holes. They're not doing anything for you. So they're except bringing in light or air. So therefore somebody can build a wall directly opposite it, even though it shuts out the view which came from that window. Okay? says when became ein l'chazaka ein meviyas satuma. Now, there's a difficulty how to read this. The Ramban, the Lehman reads it as a question. If it doesn't have a chazaka, and there's something you can build in front of it, does it also not allow tumah to pass through? Which is surely not the case, because we just saw tumah could pass through even very small. The Or Sameach in Perek Zayin v'Choshchein Malach Zayin, he wants to say what it means. Actually, it's from the Ramban. He wants to say a window which is so small, which is also variation on the thing we just said. A window which is small, so small that a tumah can't pass through it because it's smaller than the size of a drill hole. So too, it doesn't have a chazaka. You have no right to have that window because that window is not made for viewing. That window is just made for air. For what's the word? Ventilation or for illumination, and therefore you have no right to have its scenery preserved. Okay, so it's interesting the way they learn this Gemara is that in terms of there are two types of windows, and he goes into all haskolish zach about how there were two terms for windows in the old days, terms of windows which are made for ventilation, and windows which are made for views, and windows which were made for views. You have as a chazaka that if you built it, then you should be able always to have that view. But windows are made for ventilation. There's no such chazaka. Okay. Should we finish the parak? Should we stop here? You don't make a hole under a shusar rabin. Again, not allowed to. Boros, sichin, and moros. You can't make your own cave tunnel under a shusar rabin. Subway system. Rabbi Elazar Matir, Elazar printed, if you make the roof strong enough, that a wagon to travel over 2 narvani boulding bricks. And what seems easy to throw, one cannot make hooks, pegs, and juttings out into Shusarabim. If you want to make these things draw back into your own property, or motzi, and put it into your own property. If you bought a courtyard and the hand already was these in throws, these are things jutting out to Shusarabim, you retain that right to have them there. Says Manofel, what if they fell? They were there and they fell. When the person want to rebuild them, Rabbi Yochanan Viter says we compel you to forego the rebuilding. And Shosh Mar Lo Viter, we don't forego you, and you can rebuild them. Masisa Messiah Ladin and Masisa Saidan is a price which assists each one. Masisa Messiah Rabbi Yochanan Mishnah assists Rabbi Yochanan says Misha is Derech Rabbi Milbers Petoch Sadeu. The highway went through my fields. V'notla, I took away the highway, which I'm not supposed to do. If they have highway going through my fields, well, they might tough flow. But I took it away from them. I gave it to them on the other side. You lose on both counts. In other words, you lose what you gave, and you lose what was initially theirs. So basically, vis-a-vis Rishus Harabim, what Rabbi Yochanan learned for this Mishnah, Mishnah actually later on, you can't win. You always lose, no matter what. Says Masdisa, Messiah Rish Lakish, or there's a Mishnah like Rish Lakish, which says that, which says, Laka Chatzar Baziz and Tzutzros, which says if you take a yard and it had these things jutting out, Naflu, and they fell, so you can build them over again as they were to begin with. Okay, that's all for tonight, folks.